Now we've gotten a general sense of the production side of the economy and some of the features of the production side of the economy, how some of the definitions, and of course the jargon. It is an econ class after all. It's time to get into the four major market types. A couple of them blend together, so you can almost think of it as three because one of them straddles two, but there really are four. We analyze them all differently. The first market type, the market structure we're going to talk about, is kind of the simplest one. It's the one off of which we base everything else, and it's also the ideal one, and that is perfect competition. Perfect competition is the most perfectest economy that you can ever have, which is why we call it perfect competition. Economists love the idea of a perfectly competitive market. It makes us swoon. So if I start to sound a little like I'm getting kind of misty talking about this, that's why. It's because it's such a beautiful thing when you have a perfectly competitive. It's also unrealistic. So, I keep coming back to when it comes to the way we model economies, we don't really live in reality. Reality is too imperfect. So we have a nice imperfect or unrealistic but perfect model of an economy that you're never really going to see. So why do we even bother? Well, first of all, it's good to base things off of one extreme because we're going to look at another extreme that is maybe also a little unrealistic. But as I said at the very, very beginning when we talked about modeling, our models are always unrealistic to some extent or another. But they do capture a lot of economic activity that we see, and we're able to predict a lot of it if you have a truly good model. A lot of markets out there, a lot of businesses out there operate in environments that are a little more like perfect competition than anything else. A lot of the constraints of these markets, a lot of the features of them are there more so than the other market types. So for a lot of reasons, this is an important market structure to understand and to get to know. Some people, some economists will pretty much will advocate things assuming that every market is a perfectly competitive market, and that's not necessarily correct. So we need to be careful. And of course, when we look at the other market structures, we're going to understand that not everything is perfectly competitive, but a lot of the markets out there are. A lot of the economy is close to perfect competition. Nothing completely gets there. But we can't model reality because reality is too complicated. We can model approximations of reality, as we've discussed. So perfect competition. What is perfect competition? What makes it so darn perfect? Well, for one thing, we actually have definitions, and we're going to do this for every market structure. I'm just going to bring all these up right at the beginning. All four different markets are going to have some variation of these. In fact, they're all going to have something in common with another market. We're going to have a number of sellers. We're going to have products that are standardized or not. We're going to have entry and exit that is easy or not. So what do these three things mean? Let's start with a large number of sellers. Oftentimes you'll also see this as many sellers or many firms or many producers, but they all basically mean the same thing. And what they mean is lots. How's that for precision? We can also say that they have a ton, or perfectly competitive markets have a bunch of sellers. In other words, we don't put a number here. The number is not important. What's important is what happens to the market when you get a lot of sellers. A lot could be just 30 sellers. A lot could be a million. The point is, a lot of the features of this market, such as what we're going to see with the price, this will especially become clear when we talk about oligopoly, a lot of features of the market are going to be such that there are just too many other firms out there you're competing with. You really don't have a whole heck of a lot of control over things like the price. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail. So the point is here that there are enough firms to make this not a monopoly, not an oligopoly, but a very, very competitive market. The competition part here is key. It's not competitive if you don't have many other firms. If you're going to play a basketball game with yourself, you're always going to win. I don't care how bad of a shot you are. Just keep on heaving that ball up there. Eventually, it's going to go in, and you scored and nobody else scored against you and you won. That's not very competitive. That's the beautiful situation you have if you're a monopolist. That's not perfect competition. Perfect competition is like a free throw competition where you have a million different people all shooting free throws. How many can you make in 1 hour? Or I guess 1 minute. That's kind of a long time to just shoot free throws. But in 1 minute, how many free throws can you make? You got a million people shooting free throws. That's pretty tough to come out on top in that kind of scenario. And then you're going to have tiebreakers and whatever. So large number of sellers means that you don't have few sellers or few firms. That's all it really means. It means you have so many that no one of these firms can really do anything to impact this market. The market's going to go where it's going to go through the collective behavior of all the firms all together. And there's nothing any one firm can do to really change much, because the product is standardized. Coming to the second thing here. And you'll also see homogeneous product or no product differentiation. We use all of those words. And it's important to know all those different ways of describing the same thing. Standardized kind of makes it seem like the government is coming down and telling you how to make things. That's not what we're talking about here in economics, which is why some economists will prefer words like homogenized product or no product differentiation. But basically what this means is whatever you're buying in this market, you can go to any one of these many other sellers and get the exact same thing. There will be no losses in utility. There will be no gain in utility. You're getting the exact, precisely the same thing. You're not going to notice any difference. So you don't really care who you buy from. You don't really care what the type of product is because they're all the same. All you really care about here is the price. We keep coming back to the price. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But no matter which of these large number of sellers you go to, you're getting the same thing. I've seen lawn care service as an example of something that gets as close to perfect competition as it gets in the real world. Think about lawn care. You can hire a bunch of people who will do it because there are a lot of people who know how to do it, and it's not very hard to get the kind of equipment necessary. Do you care one firm to the next? You usually don't care. I mean, if somebody does even a little bit of a bad job, you're not going to go with them anymore. But when your grass is cut, it's cut. You're getting pretty much the same product no matter who you go with, so the price is going to become the more important thing here. Contrast that with buying a car. There are certain cars, certain makes and models that have a reputation for breaking down a lot. So you're not going to buy those. You will actually pay a little bit more money for a brand that has a better reputation. So that's not a perfectly competitive market. When everything is exactly the same, that's when you have a standardized product. And then ease of entry and exit in the market. This is super important. This is why a market can be perfectly competitive versus monopolized or some other less competitive industry. It's competitive because it's easy to get in and out. And the ease of exit is important too, and we'll see that when we see why prices are going to go to where they go and why some of our assumptions will hold. But getting in and out of the market is not hard to do. If anybody in the market is making a ton of money, then a lot of other people are going to see that, and they're going to say, hey, I can do the same thing. I'm going to do it because I can do it. Why not? This guy's making a bunch of money. I'm going to go make a bunch of money too. So why not do it if it's easy to get into the market? When we look at monopolies, we're going to see that we don't have ease of entry of exit. We have high barriers to entry for monopolies. Monopolists make a ton of money, right? Well, why don't you go and do the same kind of thing? Well, the answer is you can't. But with perfect competition, you can get in on the action very easily. That's why you have a large number of sellers. It's easy to get into the market. Believe it or not, agriculture is another example of a market structure that is oftentimes referred to as perfectly competitive. Standardized product, when you go and buy produce at the store, you're picking between different things that look fresher or less fresh. There may be a lot of different farms that supply to all of these. You look through 20 different tomatoes, you may be looking at the product from 20 different farms, or 1 or 5 or 15. And that part of it is kind of clear. An apple is an apple. An orange is an orange. Kumquat is a kumquat. But is it really easy to get into farming? In some respects, no. Wouldn't be easy for me. I don't know the first thing about it. The thing is, if you can buy the land, if there's land available that can be farmed, banks know about the farming industry, and they know if the land is good, and they know if you got a good deal. They know if you're able to hire people who know what they're doing, or if you know what they're doing. It's very easy for people who can get into agriculture to buy more farm space, to say that we're seeing that in this market we're getting really high prices and there are a lot of profits being made, so it's easy to secure a loan to get into the market and set up shop and start growing the crop and start getting in on the action of this increased demand for this particular good or service. So it's easy to get into the market. It's also easy to kind of shut things off. You're not in the market for potatoes anymore. You're going to use that same land to grow something else in the next growing season after you let it stay fallow for a while as needed, etc. It's pretty easy to get in and out. So you need all three of these. It's not a most of these things, a most of these kind of thing. Perfect competition is all of these. You have to have a bunch of firms. You have to have no difference from one firm to the next when it comes to the product that's being bought. There's no, hey, I'll pay a little more money for this other thing because I think I'm getting better quality or not. There's none of that. Same thing being sold by a ton of people, and if all these firms are making a lot of money, more are going to come in because it's easy to do. If everybody's losing money, a lot of them are going to get out because that's easy to do too. All of these need to be in place for us to have a perfectly competitive firm. So now that we know the characteristics, time to get into assumptions. Remember, when it comes to modeling, we make assumptions. And assumptions, whether we mean to make them or not, we make them. So it's important to keep in mind what these assumptions are and why they're important to the model. And once we get these straight, we're going to see not only that we are truly talking about a very unrealistic extreme, but we're also going to see why we might expect some of the outcomes we're going to expect, and why, while it might not be realistic, it's going to get pretty close to some real world markets that we might analyze. But because I try to keep these from going over 15 minutes, and I'm going to spend well more than 3 minutes discussing these assumptions because they're important, we'll do that in the next video.